Good evening. Welcome to Silver Slumbers, a channel where I'm tasked to help you get those soothing Z's that you deserve. If you have any suggestions such as story topics or what kind of background noise you're interested in, I'll put a poll in the community tab before uploading the next video. This will be a great way to have you all interact with me and vice versa. Be sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any more videos like these, and watch my playlist in my playlist tab to get hours of content to sleep through. Lastly, if you're enjoying what you are hearing, down below in the description box, if you'd like to buy me a coffee, it would be really appreciated as it does help me and the channel out. I thank you in advance. In today's video, I'm going to be reading True Scary Stories, Volume 4. So sit back, relax, and close those eyes. And remember, don't get lost in the dark. Warning: some of these stories contain graphic content. Viewers' discretion is advised. I was about 12. Me and Mom had gone into town 45 minutes out to do some shopping with some of her friends. I had a corn snake at the time, so I asked her if I could walk around a pet store one door down from the mini supermarket. She was shopping in to compare the prices of frozen mice with our local seller. She said sure, just come back as soon as I was done. The pet store had been there as long as I can remember. It had a very warehouse feel about it, and it was poorly lit by dim fluorescent lights too far above the floor. Before checking out the mice, I just wanted to check out the rest of the store, being the curious 12-year-old I was. As I was roaming the aisle, I noticed you. You were in every aisle I strolled down. Bald, middle-aged, a bit tubby, wearing a dark blue plumber's overall with a white shirt. It was summer and it was hot. I remember wondering why on earth you would come into a non-air conditioning building, and that you carried a basket and there was nothing in it. As you slowly stalked me down the aisle, I noticed your basket wasn't getting any more full. I started walking faster, taking random turns down different aisles to see if I was just being paranoid. But there you were. You were always 10-15 feet behind me. At some point, I finally thought I lost you. I powered walk out of the pet store, and as soon as I cleared the doors, I sprinted down the street to the mini market to find my mom. I hadn't even make it down the second aisle completely. I caught up to her, immediately stripped off my bright pink hoodie and slung it in the cart, as well as ripped my hair tie out of my hair. I was smart for doing that because when I looked back at the door, you were standing there, still carrying the basket from the pet store and scanning the store for any sight of a 12-year-old in a bright pink hoodie and ponytail. When we left, I saw you in your van as you drove away, a plain white van like something out of a true crime documentary or horror film. I thought about you sometimes and how if you had caught me before I got to that supermarket on that quiet Wednesday afternoon, what horrors could I have been waiting for me in the back of the van? To the guy in the overalls who followed me out of the pet store without putting down his basket, even after 10 years. Let's never meet again. I deliver pizza, and I've been having a really busy night, non-stop back and forth without any time to even pause and take a leak. I've been so busy that I wasn't really thinking about bathroom breaks, but we're also going through a bit of a heat wave in our area, so I've been drinking mounds of water. All of a sudden, as I was driving to this particular delivery, the urge to go hit me, like things went from 0 to 60 in an instant. Thankfully, I was close to the customer, so I can get this one over with quickly, or so I thought. I pull up to the house, and it was an area that I'd delivered in before, so I could immediately see that something wasn't right. All of the lights in the house were off, not even the globe of television or anything. It was extra apparent because the street light closest to the door happened to be out of order, and on top of it all, The block was dead quiet. This is a big university area, and obviously there aren't many students renters in July, but there had been at least one person because someone ordered this pizza. Maybe they just like sit in the dark or they were out in the backyard. Whatever. I just didn't want to get out of my car and knock on a quiet house in the middle of the night. This was around 9:30 p.m. without checking that I had the correct address and the customer was inside. It was torching that night. Even after the sundown, my car's AC is a joke, and the piping hot pizza didn't help things much. So I had to try and open the car door as infrequently as possible to keep the cool air in. I called the number the customer provided, and the voice on the other end said, kind of brusquely and out of breath, "Yeah." I just try to keep it clear and concise. "Hey, it's your pizza. It's right outside the front door. There doesn't appear to be anyone home?" And the customer replied, still gasping for air, "Yeah, I'm not home." I had to pee so badly by that point that I was much less patient than I would otherwise be with the customer right now of the gate. "Well then, I'm going to have to terminate the order because I've arrived in state delivery window and you were supposed to pay in cash, so I don't know what to tell you. Plan ahead next time." I instantly regretted letting my bladder do the talking for me as the voice on the other end came through more clearly as a young, bubbly, and very distraught girl who couldn't have been more than 20 or 25. "Oh my gosh, I am so sorry. I was running down the street to get to you, so I couldn't hear you," she cried. "I just switched over to my AirPods. Is this better? Sorry, I completely lost track of time at work, but I knew you were coming. That's why I'm literally running home right now. Please don't leave. I'm starving and I don't have a car. Seriously, please don't leave. 5 minutes tops, okay?" I know what it's like to be hungry and running late and have no car, but not live near any restaurants. Plus, when I heard her voice, I began to remember more specifically having delivered to this place a couple of times before, and she's always been perfectly nice. Now, I felt bad for snapping at her because I tried to walk it back while simultaneously looking out my window for potentially spots to pee. No, my bad. No. My bad. I'm letting the heat get to me. It's not your fault. No need to rush. See you when you get here." I hung up on the phone, and while surveilling the street, was starting to think I was really out of luck. All the other houses had people in them, and they were close together, so there were no clumps of trees or out of the way patches of land or anything. Of course, I had to just toss my empty bottle at the last delivery because, I'm an idiot. Finally, I decided it was escalating to the point of emergency, and the safest bet was to use a bush in front of the woman's house. She wasn't home. The streetlight was out, so no one would see me, including the people who were home inside. My car was parked across the street, and we're a small shop who don't wear uniforms. So if someone did spot me, they have no way to connect me to my employer. Animals pee outside all the time. Humans are animals. This is fine. I skirted over to the tallest bush in her front yard. She didn't really have much of a yard, just more of a walkway lined up with bushes and flowers that ran adjacent to her front door. The biggest cluster of bushes. The only one where I could be sure where there'd be no visible splatter on the side of the house was about 4 feet from the door. I looked both ways, unzip, and let it fly. After the initial millisecond of relief, I noticed the sound was way off, more like pissing on something solid than something leafy. I started panicking, thinking I'd aimed wrong, but once I start, I can't stop midstream. So I kept squinting into the darkness to see if maybe I was hitting maybe a rock or something and could just move a few inches over. Instead, all of a sudden, I heard a way more concerning voice, a deep voice exclaiming, "What the F?" And before I could turn around, assuming I'd been caught by a neighbor, a man came leaping out of the bushes. He blew by me, brushing my golden shower off as I did. He spit pretty and pathetically on the ground, so I think I might have beamed right into his face. I didn't see where he went after a few paces, but though this next part is kind of a blur, I do think I remember hearing a car screech out, from a bit further away after a minute. I'd gotten some night vision by that point, so I was able to make out his height and build and outfit, but only the most generic details of each. I was in such shock that I didn't even put my junk away. I just stood there trying to figure out what had happened. The reality was so terrifying that my mind refused to accept it and impulsively searched for a reasonable explanation that could make everything okay. I thought, could these bushes lead to some backyard area and maybe just look like they were against the house? Could they have been obscuring by a window? My inner voice was desperately screaming. Bruh, that man was wearing a hoodie in 90-degree weather. That was a bad man. You're in a bad situation. But the very idea that I was within inches of a guy who had been hiding in the bushes at all, let alone in front of a young woman's house at night, just wasn't something I was ready to grasp on. I was coping by not coping. My fight or flight response totally failed at me at this point because I'm an idiot and I did absolutely the last thing I should have done and approached the bushes and tried to validate this. There must have been a good reason for the man in the hoodie to be behind the bushes in the middle of the night. So I walk over to the side, turn on my phone flashlight, and try to peer around the line of the shrewberry. Pro tip, as scary as things may look in the dark, seeing them with a single beam of your flashlight can sometimes make it worse. That's when I saw the bag. There was a tattered drawstring bag sitting behind the bushes, slightly splashed with pee. But I was in such of a moronic state from shock that I groped around for it thinking, see, this is it. This will explain why he was back here. It explained it once I maneuvered it over and pulled it open with a sharp knife, a roll of duct tape, and a bottle of pills. The delusions officially broke at that point, and all of the adrenaline, endorphins, and self-preservation instincts that had been suppressed kicked over, and 10 times over. I became whatever the opposite of dazed is, more laser focused than I have ever been in my life, with one singular goal: get back to my car. I dropped the bag, booked it across the street, got in my car, and slammed the pedal to the floor before the door was even closed all the way. I went as far as I could, as fast as I could, until I hit a red signal. Then I pulled off to the side and realized I shouldn't be driving anymore than necessary in my condition that I was in. I was shaking heavily. I pulled into the parking lot of a 24-hour drugstore and took a breath. I was finally calm and coherent enough to zip up and formulate a plan of action. My first lucid thought was, who do I call first? The police or the girl whose house that was? I thought about it for what could have been more than 10 seconds, but felt like an hour, and decided, okay, I'm in a locked car with the engine running. If trouble starts, I can drive away. I know something's up. She might not. She needs to know not to keep walking in that direction. But as I was dialing her number, it occurred to me, what if there was no girl? I thought I remembered delivering to this house before, but what if I was wrong? What if the girl on the phone was just a decoy to get me to get robbed, or worse? Every pizza guy on the planet has seen the Evil Genius documentary by now. So I thought, she called me out of breath. She wasn't home. The whole thing was off. Can't risk it. I'll start with the cops. I called 911. The operator was very helpful in keeping me calm because I was completely wrecked at this point. He kept assuring me that someone would be there soon. I kept telling him that they had to be there before the girl did, but I was trying to express 3 thoughts at once and really damaging my own credibility. It came out more as, you got to save this girl because he wasn't after me. I was just delivering a pizza. Unless they were after me, in which case there might have not been a girl, but I talked to one on the phone. So then you should find the girl because they used her to lure me in. But if she's real, she doesn't know what the guy was or what he looked like, who was also real. But there could be more than 2 guys if there was actually a girl. And you know what? Even if there isn't a girl, there might actually be more than one guy. I only checked one part of the bushes, so I don't know now. But we'll know which guy is in one of them I saw because I pissed all over him. You know, I didn't mean to. This was back when I thought the girl was real, but not home. But she might be real, so you really need to find her if so, because if the guy is real, finally. They basically just asked me to stop talking and stay in the line. But that's when I saw an incoming call from the customer. I couldn't answer without disrupting the 911 call, so I just ignored it. She then sent me this text like, "Hey, I'm here. I don't see you." I told 911 that she was there, and they said that officers were only minutes away, but who knows how long that meant, especially after I'd given such a scattered account of events in my panic. I just felt overwhelmed with guilt because my rational mind said the odds of her being a decoy for some large scam targeting pizza guys were low, and the odds of her being an intent victim of a predator were high. So I put 911 call on mute where I can hear them, but they can't hear me, and turned back, heart absolutely pounding on my chest, compulsively muttering the F word the entire way. Then I took 911 off mute and told them I had to return to look for the girl. They weren't happy about that, but I saw her meandering past the parked cars in the street, looking to see if one was mine. I waved her down, flashing my bright lights. She bounced on over to the window of my car, happy-go-lucky. I figured that was a good sign, but she wasn't in on whatever this was. But I was just so scared to be back in the general area and to not know what had just happened or what was going to happen. I kept whispering, "Get in, get in." And she was like, "Get it? Huh? Oh, you want me to get the pizza from the back?" I didn't want to make the same mistake with her that I had with the 911. So instead of trying to tell her the whole story, I stuck to the bare, basic facts. "There was a man in your bushes. I'm on the phone with the police. I don't know where he is right now. Please get in the back of the car so we can lock the doors." I was barely able to get those sentences out, and I was shaking like I had 10 cups of black coffee. I held up the phone with 911 on the call screen to verify with her. I thought that was why she got in the car with no further explanation, but it turns out that wasn't entirely it. "You still there? Is she with you? Are you safe? Is anyone else there?" 911 kept checking in, not knowing who the third party I was talking to was. I reassured them, and we drove more cautiously this time to locate 911. They instruct us to wait to speak with an officer until they cleared the area. I didn't actually have to do much after that. The police came pretty soon after. A police car met us. I gave a statement telling them everything I observed, and she went to go speak with 2 more officers in more detail than they need from me. It turns out the reason she got right into the strange pizza guy's car without probing any deeper into my story is because she knew who the man was right away from my description. She had an abusive ex-boyfriend who was apparently psychotic enough that he immediately came to mind from hearing, "There's a guy in your bushes." She later called us to thank me and insist on leaving a huge tip. I wasn't there when the call came in, so the kid who answered didn't know to refuse to accept the money. But the manager already promised the next time we see her, we can load her up with enough 1 free pie cards to last a lifetime. Easily the scariest thing that's ever happened to me, on the job or off. I didn't get a chance to tell the story much, but I try to avoid sharing it with anyone who could probably know the girl or know about the event. But I'm still not the same since. Even though I know he didn't even do anything to me directly, this truly shook me to my core. So, man in the bushes, let's not meet again. I was driving home from my house sitting in another city. It takes me about 6 hours to drive on this motorcycle because I have to regularly pull over and massage my legs. I left around 11:30 in the morning and missed a weather alert with thunderstorm warnings along my route. This road takes me through mountain passes with lots of hairpin turns. Normal speed is 80 kilometers per hour, and a couple of these turns have post speeds going as low as 30 miles per hour. It's starting to hail and pouring rain, full on thunderstorm weather. I'm doing my best to keep the speed limit while also trying to be safe, and there's nowhere to pull over to wait it out, and not that many passing lanes. At the last hairpin turn, I slow it down to take at the posted speed. This huge truck, who's been behind me for about 15 minutes, pulls into the oncoming lane illegally and speeds up next to me, laying on his horn. It's a blinding corner. He sees oncoming traffic coming at him. Instead of doing the smart thing and slowing down to get back behind me, he decides to gun it. If I hadn't downshift when I realized what he was going to do, he would have nailed me with the 30-foot trailer he was dragging behind him, sending me flying off into the cliff next to us. The next town is about 20 minutes away. I pulled into a gas station to dry out a little and calm down after what just happened. I watched him drive away. After about 2 hours, I pull into a fruit stand to grab a snack and take a break. This is now 3 towns further down the highway. Lo and behold, he sees my motorcycle and pulls in to have a go at me, yells at me that he had to teach me a lesson for slowing down on the highway. When I asked him what he would have done if he had killed me, he told me it would have been my own fault. He would have laughed if I went down the cliff. So, yeah, the guy who tried to run me off the cliff, let's never meet again. This happened to me about a month ago, and it still boggles me. 2 points of background to make this story make more sense. 1. I live in Tokyo and commute via those crazily famous crowded trains daily. There exists of them this kind of unspoken agreement that everyone works together to make this suck as little as possible. People for the most part hold their own backpacks in front of them. Men don't man spread, etc. But that's when the trains are full. About 2 stops before me, the train goes from sardine can to everyone on the train could lay on the seats and have room left over. So usually I could sit down at this point. Number 2, I am not a Japanese woman, very obviously so. Even when I'm in my white dress shirt and pencil skirt, like all the other office drones, I'm often the only obviously non-Japanese woman on my train in the morning. But despite my appearance, I'm fluent in Japanese. So, one day, I sit down when the train empties out, put my headphones in, mobile game going, ready to enjoy the 10 minutes of sitting. I get on my hour commute. I'm sitting with my legs crossed, but there's maybe 10 people in the whole car, so I'm not in anyone's way. I'm tuned out when all of a sudden, a hand reaches out and grabs my bare knee. Remember, I'm in my skirt. I, of course, jolted out of my skin, ripped out my headphones, and look up at the hand's owner. It's some skinny old Japanese dude, maybe in his 60s. He points at my legs, then at other people on the train. Again, a max of 10 in the car that can hold easily 50 plus, easily, and probably held about 80 10 minutes ago. In slightly broken English, he says, "You must not cross legs." I'm so bewildered by this. I start to tell him in Japanese. The train isn't crowded anymore. I'm not in anyone's way, but he doesn't like this answer. He starts to reach down my legs again, presumably to uncross my legs by himself. I, liking even less of this, summon up my loudest non-scream, "Don't touch me," in Japanese, and thankfully, this is enough to get him to stop that, as another thing you don't do on trains is make a fuss. Sadly though, yet another thing you don't do here is get involved. So despite a woman all but screaming, "Don't touch me," is some foreign woman causing trouble. Best not to get involved, etc., etc. So no one comes over. So while I made it clear that I will not stand for a physical confrontation, this old dude still feels comfortable enough to stand directly in front of me, nearly knee to knee, looming over me while he repeatedly, endlessly, "You must." He did this for at least 5 minutes. I didn't move. I didn't blink or break eye contact. I started plan B's through letter P's of how to get off this train at the next stop. Thankfully, he gave up before the next stop, shaking his head and calling me a rude B word in Japanese before wandering off. Still, take the same train, but haven't seen him since. Let's not meet again, leg police effer, lest you want to find out what happens when you loom over a girl at junk punting height. So last night, I was at my classmate's house working on a group project we had due tomorrow. I live in an apartment in a town where our university is located, and my classmate lives with his parents' house, which is foothills just outside of town. In order to get to the house, you have to drive a relatively secluded and narrow 2-lane road for about 5 to 6 miles. We started working on the project about 6 p.m., and I ended up hanging out for a while after we finished working our project. So I left his house pretty late, at about 11, and started down the road back towards town. I didn't realize how tough it would be to navigate the road at night. There were no street lights on the road. It was unkempt and riddled with potholes. On top of this, I I had no cell service, so I had to drive very slowly to make sure I didn't blow out one of my tires since I had to use my spare tire a couple weeks back. I figured it was about 3 miles from the house when I rounded a tight corner when I saw a pickup truck with a camper shell parked diagonally across the road. The manner in which it was parked completely impeded my path, and I couldn't drive around it because there was a gully of both sides of the road. The only way for me to go at this point was backwards, where there was a pull-off that I could use to turn my car around. At first, I couldn't see inside the cab, but when I turned my high beams on, I saw that there was a man slouched over in his driver's seat, his head resting against the steering wheel, as if he'd been knocked out or was in a bad accident. I immediately sensed that something was wrong. The way his car was coincidentally come to rest in a position that would totally block the road was a big red flag for me. I had heard stories of people playing dead in the road in order to luring unsuspecting people out of their cars just so they could rob them. I decided, F this crap, and elected to go back to my classmate's house and explain what was going on. I threw the car into reverse and kept my eyes darting back and forth between my rearview mirror and on the truck. I looked and saw that I was almost to the pull-off where I could turn around. When I looked back, my heart skipped about 5 beats. The man who had been slouched over the driver's seat was now walking at my car at a hurried pace, while a few other men jumped out of the camper shell and started moving towards me as well. I panicked and accelerated backwards into the pull-off, which really messed up my undercarriage and car pretty bad. As I put into drive, the guy was already at my passenger side door, tugging on the handle, which, thank the Lord, was locked. I only caught a brief glimpse of him, but his face apparently was scabbed and leathery, definitely a meth head or some sort of drug abuser. I sped away and didn't slow down at all until I reached the house, constantly checking my rear view to see if they were following me. Thankfully, they didn't tail me, and when I reached the house, I explained what had happened to my classmate, and we both called the cops. I was grateful that my buddy's parents were kind enough to let me stay the night. They didn't find anyone on the road matching description. I filed for an incident report, and they told me that they would keep a lookout for some similar looking vehicle and suspicious activity. But holy crap, I'm still so shooken over it. I keep getting the same adrenaline rush I got when I saw the guy charging me whenever I think about it. Please share similar experiences you had, as I would appreciate a good read or a good discussion to clear my headspace. I was watching my daughter's kids while she and her husband go out in town. They have a teenage daughter. Let's call her Alyssa. At like 3 in the morning, I had woken up by a weird rustling sound and looked out the window and saw movement. Soon, I saw a boy emerge from the bushes on the side of the house. I saw a bike tossed on the lawn that definitely wasn't ours. My first thought that it was a burglar, casing houses, but since he looked like he was young and came through on a bike, I figured scaring him straight would be enough for him to decide to head home. Didn't want to ruin a teenager's life by calling cops straight away. So I went out on the porch, flipping the lights on and said, "Can I help you?" in my teacher classroom voice. The guy looked surprised, but not nervous. He was wearing a Letterman style jacket, but once I got a clear view of him in the streetlights, he seemed much older than my granddaughter, gruff and more wiry than athletic. He walked up closer to the house and said, "Yeah, I'm looking for Alyssa." I gave him a disappointing glare, hoping he'd come to realize that he came looking for a girl late at night. And a grumpy old person answered, "It's time to split." I'm thinking what must have happened is Alyssa knew her parents were going to be out of town, and maybe before she knew I'd be staying over, told a secret older boyfriend to come over. It was late and I was alone with several kids, so I didn't want to come any closer to the house. I also thought it was weird he came so late and wanted to make sure Alyssa actually wanted to talk to him. I said, "I'm sorry, who?" And he said, "Alyssa. You know, Alyssa." He said the last name. "This is her house." I thought he knew her full name. They must have at least been friends. I said, "You wait here." He started to walk up and I felt a sickening burn in my gut. Instinct kicked in and I yelled, "No, stop, freeze." Then suddenly readjusted and said, "You stay right there. This is private property. Don't take a step closer. Wait there." I go in, and Alyssa is asleep, just one room over from where the rustling first occurred, and I woke her up and say something to the effect of, I don't know what the big idea was to have friends come over at this time of night, but you tell them to go home. She has no clue of what I'm talking about. I say, there's a guy outside asking for you. Confused. She gets up and goes out to the window. She sees him and goes white as a sheet. He asked for me? Yeah. By name? Yes. Call the police. I've never seen him in my life. I called 911 immediately, but as I was on the phone with them, Alyssa started tugging my arm. He's coming up. I had younger kids in the house to think about, so I kept the door latched and pulled it just enough to open up the latch and yelled, I asked my husband, and none of us know anyone named Alyssa. Leave my property or I'm calling 911. He got angry and started yelling for her to come out. Thankfully, the police came pretty quickly, and when he heard the sirens, he grabbed the bike and rode off. I watched where he was running, and he jumped into the passenger seat of a car without headlights and front plates and sped off. The police followed the same direction once I pointed them, but they didn't get him. They advised us to take all of her social media details offline if she was sure that she didn't know the person, and say that they get a couple of similar reports recently and they were looking into it. I got a heavy-duty lock and she slept in my room for the remainder of my visit. I told the story in many other places on the other accounts before, but it bears repeating. One day, I was an elementary schooler, I think probably 3rd or 4th grade. I was woken up by my mom in a rush. She had overslept, and since she always woke up in the morning, this meant that I too overslept, and now there was no way I was going to be ready for school early enough to get on the school bus. IIRC. School started at 8 in the morning, and my bus pickup time was 7 a.m., but it was already like 6:40 or something, and I was still in my pajamas and hadn't even taken breakfast yet. So my mom decided that for today, we would just tell the bus driver to go on ahead, and she would take me to school, which would probably give me plenty of time to get ready. So I'm sitting there at the dining room table eating breakfast, still in my pajamas, and it's now about 6:50. We hear the bus pull up, about 10 minutes earlier than usual. My mom peeks her head over, out of the door, into the fog morning, and waves the bus on. She closes the door and comes back inside, but the bus doesn't pull away. There's a knock on the door, and my mom opens it to find a man in a bus driver uniform. He explained that he's a substitute bus driver because the regular driver called in sick. He said he knows that he's a few minutes early since he wanted to get early start on the route since he didn't know it well. Mom explains to him that she's going to take me to school since we woke up late. He gets visibly upset and says that he can wait a few minutes since he's already running ahead of time. My mom insists that no, I won't be ready to go in a few minutes, and she tells him to go on ahead and just drive off. He seems angry about this, but turns around and got back into the bus and left. I've returned to eating my breakfast and still don't have my school clothes on at this point. But at 7 in the morning sharp, another bus pulls up to my house. My mom thinks that this is weird and goes outside to talk to them. She comes back inside looking terrified, but doesn't really say anything about it and tells me to finish getting ready for school. At the time, I didn't know what happened, but mom would end up telling me a few years later. When she went to the second bus, she found out that it has been driven by a regular bus driver, and it was full of other kids that were usually on the route. The first bus was empty, by the way. My mom asked about the driver, about the substitute driver, and about him calling in sick. He said, I never called in sick. There is no substitute driver on my route. The bus driver immediately called dispatch in a panic and told my mom to go inside and call the police, which she did without me knowing, and report the incident. There was absolutely no one doing my driver's route that day. Whoever this was most likely a kidnapper who had been targeting me. I never heard anything about it again, not even if someone else had ended up being picked up by this mysterious fake bus driver. But chances are, had I gotten to the bus, I would have never made it to school or back home. And if my mom hadn't overslept on that specific day, I would have been on that bus. I'll start by saying I have a terrible biological father. He had been a shady person all my life and constantly caused me a lot of grief. This is just one of those examples. When I was 4, my parents split up. My mother and I moved to the States, and they agreed I would visit my dad every school weekday or holiday. There's one particular time. I had been with him for a few days when I was playing with my cousin at a nearby park. A car pulled up, and I recognized the man as one of my dad's friends. He called me over, and without thinking, I ran over to him and left my cousin at the park. He asked me if I wanted to show him where my dad lived, and I agreed and got into his car. I gave directions and didn't notice at all that they weren't following them correctly. Looking back, I didn't really know the way anyway. After way too long, I realized that they were getting closer to the city, which is far from my dad's house. We pulled up at a house that I didn't recognize, and the man told me to wait in the car. I did, and I didn't feel scared at all for some reason. He eventually took me inside, and I definitely started feeling unsafe. I mainly remember 2 girls passed out with their tops off, and a much older man was filling them up everywhere. I made eye contact with this man, and he made me sick to my stomach. I had definitely figured out at this point that I was in a bad situation. The lady took me to the bathroom and brought me a sandwich. The bread was stale, and I wasn't hungry, but I ate it all because I felt bad for her, which doesn't make a lot of sense, but that's what I was thinking about. The lady told me a lot of things I didn't understand, but she left, and I remember my dad was coming to pick me up soon. I fell asleep waiting for him. I wet the bed that night, and no one came to see me the next day until I cried very loudly and banged on the door. The lady came back and yelled at me for stinking up her bathroom, and I was asking about my dad. She said that he was coming tonight after he finished work. She didn't offer me a shower or a bath, so I just sat in my soiled pants all day. After that, everything started to turn to a blur. Really, my dad didn't come that night, and I was so terrified. In my head, I felt like I was in there for months. I thought I was missing school and everyone had forgotten about me. In reality, I was there for 5 days. They let me take one shower. I don't remember eating much except for those boring sandwiches, and I had chips and gravy once. Finally, my mom drove across the country to come get me. After not being able to get a hold of me or my dad for so long, and then me missing the pre-booked flight home, she panicked and came looking for me. Thank God she did. She found my dad at his girlfriend's house, methed out completely, hiding out. Turns out he owed a lot of drug money to these people who had taken me. They told him that they had me, but he couldn't afford it or didn't want me back. Whatever it was, he didn't want to bother to try to get me back. My amazing mom paid his debt for him after borrowing from a lot of people, and she came back to get me. I remember when someone came into that room and told me that my mom was here, and I walked out and I could smell her. It was the best feeling to feel safe again. She took me home, and I didn't see my dad again for a long time. She never called the police. My parents' relationship was very complicated then, and I fully understand the choices that she made. I'm definitely okay now. I've spoken about this in my therapy, and I've come to terms with most of the things that I went through as a child. But still, an effed up situation for a 4-year-old girl to be in. So, to my dad's friend and the sandwich lady, and even to my own father himself, let's not meet again. Thank you guys so much for supporting me in these past videos. It's been amazing, and you guys have been interacting with me in the comments section in the community tab, and I just love it. Thank you. If you guys are enjoying what I'm uploading, then I'll just keep going. Please consider subscribing and commenting down below. It will help me get my videos out there more. If you have any more suggestions of video topics, please let me know in the comments or in the community tab. Also, I'm going to make a playlist for raining sleep videos and have certain selected videos that I think will be ideal for a good night's sleep because I am well over 8 hours of content that I could put into a playlist. So go ahead and check out the playlist tab. I'll have it named as 8+ hours of slumber videos. Thank you again. I hope you enjoyed these true scary stories, part 4. If you made this far, I want to thank you for tuning in. If you are asleep, well, maybe you can hear me in your dream world. Keep dreaming, as this is the only time where you can escape reality, and I'll let you listen to the rain. Enjoy the slumber world.